All right. Welcome, everyone. Um, yeah, good afternoon. The Habibie Center is really privileged to welcome you and our esteemed speakers joining us for our first Talking ASEAN in 2024, actually. And we'll discuss Laos ASEAN Chairmanship priorities and concerns. And my name is Lutfi, and I am a researcher at ASEAN Studies Program at the Habibie Center, of course. And yeah, I will moderate today's discussion. And quick facts, last year as well, I moderated a similar discussion on Indonesia's 2023 ASEAN Chairmanship and now Laos Chairmanship. And I would say that Indonesia has made quite significant, ASEAN has made quite significant strides under Indonesia chairmanship. And now we have arrived at its succeeding chairmanship, Laos Chairmanship. And as last year's, actually, Laos Chairmanship took place at a very pivotal geopolitical and geoeconomic juncture in the region. We see the major power rivalry, we see dispute and crisis and economic turbulence around us still happening. We have this growing unilateralism as well, and in Indo-Pacific has and also will see numerous national elections coming. We have the United States in November, and Taiwan also have just had their election, Indonesia as well. So I think all of this election have a good chance of bringing any of these specific countries to a significant political transition. And also, there are concerns, there are voices that raises about the potential threats to this year's chairmanship, as Laos had struggled with macroeconomic instability, and we know it has this debt problem, and this have sparked discussions about the potential threats of increasing external political influence within the ASEAN. However, I'd have one question in my mind. Are these scenarios truly imminent, or is it just potential threats that we need to be aware of? That's the thing. And ASEAN, one thing for sure, ASEAN's ability to define regional order now is being challenged, actually since this past decade. And Laos chairmanship, of course, it holds immense potential to answer these challenges and even to regain the trust of our ASEAN external partners. And yeah, that's the thing that we are about to discuss today, actually. And here we have three speakers now, and I would like to invite you all to welcome Pak Teuku Reza Shah, Associate Professor in International Relations at Universitas Padjadjaran. We also, on the corner, we have Fitra Faisal Hastiadi, founder of Next Policy and, of course, the economist at the Universitas Indonesia. And beside me, we have Mas Andrew Mantong, researcher of International Relations Department at CSIS Indonesia. Now, before we begin the discussion, I would like to explain how we play. So each speakers will have 15 minutes to give their remarks, maybe with the help of their presentation, and the discussion will continue with the question and answer session. I think it's simple, and of course, I would like to welcome as well our YouTube participants. We have the YouTube participants here, and I would like to remind them as well, as we are going with the discussion. You can join the discussion as well by submitting your question, but do not forget, put your name and your affiliation so we can identify you. Now, without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Pak Teuku Reza Shah. He had his tenure as the chair of International Relations Department at Universitas Padjadjaran in the early 2000s. And Pak Teuku also was assigned as the Dean of the Faculty of Humanities at the President University. Pak Teuku as well earned his Master of Arts degree from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, Murdoch University, Western Australia, and Northern Malaysia University, if I mention it correct, Pak. Yeah, of course. Pak Teuku Reza Shah, I'll give the floor to you, and you can use it.
Pak Lutfi, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, Brothers and sisters, peace be upon us. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. It's an honor to come back, Bapak. I was here a couple of years ago to talk about the same topic. At that time, we focused on Vietnam. I'm honored, and I'm honored to be back, and I've prepared about 9 slides. Today, Laos is the chair of ASEAN. And then allow me to start with what is the job of the chair? Well, the job of the chair of ASEAN is, among others, the spokesperson for the 10 members of regional organization. This is too advanced for me. And then as chief executive in chairing and facilitating official meetings and task forces. Number 3, tabling new initiatives and programs to advance regional cooperation. Finally, doing informal role as a consensus builder, and to exhibit leadership and diplomatic acumen to find common ground among diverging views. Big task, isn't it? And then the topic today is identifying priorities of Laos ASEAN Chairman and exploring, I wrote challenges, yeah. Technically it should be concern, yeah, during Laos ASEAN Chairmanship. The background. The background following Vietnam's membership into ASEAN in 1995. During that time, Vietnam was the biggest power in Indochina. And then Vietnam joined ASEAN later on. I think we can read the data from ASEAN survey. But there's an expert called Nguyen Phu Tung, but came to ASEAN countries and asked, hey, I would like to seriously join ASEAN. Please answer our questions. Yes, what's the answer, sir? Oh, is ASEAN Seattle in disguise? No. And then the second question is ASEAN against Vietnam? No. Is ASEAN against communism? No. Then the final question was, will Vietnam membership into ASEAN benefit ASEAN? Yes, 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 yes. Even though we produced a contrasting answer earlier on when Pak Harto met President Gerald Ford in 1975. We were very much against communism at the time. We were afraid that the domino theory will happen, but later on, following the fall of the Berlin Wall, we began to be more open, and we embrace our brothers and sisters from Indochina's region. And Laos became a full member of ASEAN on the 23rd of July 1997 and received the baton of ASEAN Chairmanship from Indonesia at the closing of the 43rd ASEAN Summit in Jakarta. We have seen the shaking hand of our 2 top leaders. Since then, Laos became the chair of ASEAN 2024. If Indonesia's chairmanship in ASEAN carries the theme ASEAN Matters, Epicentrum of Growth, Laos' chairmanship of ASEAN brought the theme Enhancing Connectivity and Resilience. This theme aligns with Laos' promise to build and achieve a more connected and resilient ASEAN. In fact, Laos is a landlocked country, yeah? And then Laos chairmanship period in ASEAN will focus further on the ASEAN community. This is data coming from the primary sources, ASEAN Secretariat, and creating opportunities in facing geopolitical and geoeconomic challenges and changes. Then Laos will develop a regional architecture for stability, peace, and development in ASEAN. As an Indonesian, I find that the use of 2 keywords, in this case, Laos chairmanship theme, in this case, connectivity and resilience, is clear. Because I happen to grow up during Pak Harto period. So I really understand the meaning of transition, peace, domestic stability, and the need to experience, well, we call it trickle-down effect at the time. And then we also understood the stages of economic development. I could understand how development in Laos is progressing, even though when it comes to basic data, I'm still have to struggle. So on one hand, Laos is a landlocked country. We'll have to work hard to make itself a land-linked. There's a shift between landlocked to land-linked country. And on the other hand, Laos as the small country. So as a small country, we need to understand the psychology of small country, but always feeling uneasy, yeah, concerned. This reminds me of countries like New Zealand, but New Zealand, feeling uneasy, small, and small is beautiful. But meaning smallness do not stop countries to become more internationally interacting. So on the other hand, Laos, as a small country inside ASEAN, needs to continuously empower itself economically and to make itself a credible partner inside ASEAN as well as in the eyes of the world. Okay. Now come the next part. How to use this part? This one. Okay. As full member of ASEAN and also ASEAN Chair in 2004 and 2016. So this is quite unique. ASEAN is working based on rotation, based on alphabetical order. Laos was the chair in 2004 and 2016. I find that Laos has successfully altered its mental map from an impoverished and geographically isolated country to becoming a country capable of working productively with its ASEAN neighbors and dialogue partners. So this is uniqueness of Laos, because in ASEAN we treat each other as fellow families. In this case, the mechanism is called consensus, consensus and consultation. It's coming from the Indonesian ideas of musyawarah and mufakat. So based on this, we grow up together. And then inside Laos, inside ASEAN, Laos is also known as a member country with rapid economic growth. This is something we need to appreciate. Laos has utilized the best mechanism ASEAN has. Go to the next slide, please. Priorities. 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 I think before coming to priorities, allow me, we have one picture here. This is coming from the Lao philosophy. Laosian quote. Looks simple, but it is very meaningful. It's very deep here. It represents continuity, change, love of the mother nature. A tray full of money is not worth a mind full of knowledge. I hope this quotation is correct. Anybody coming from Laos here? I hope. Laos, okay. Okay. A tray full of money is not worth a mind full of knowledge. Meaning Laos is a thinking society. And live with vultures become a vulture. Live with crows become a crow. So living with ASEAN countries with full of friendship, love, and stages of development, I think has made Laos aware that the place of Laos is in Southeast Asia with ASEAN countries. Priorities: internally, continue to diversify the national economy in the areas of trade, investment, and tourism, and to maintain close economic and political relations with its immediate neighbors, Thailand, Vietnam, and China. We can imagine the psychology of a state, small, and then landlocked, surrounded by Thailand, Vietnam, and China. In the process, as a small state, Laos will work strongly to avoid dominance and marginalization coming from its immediate neighbors, while remain cautious on all kinds of policies introduced by its mightier neighbors. Internally also, even though average household incomes improve, there is a constant need to better control inflation and to maintain purchasing power, especially maintaining food security among urban families. So the need to combine stability and prosperity. As an Indonesian, I really understand the meaning of need to combine at the same time prosperity and security. Internally, Laos will work strongly to reduce poverty. Among others, making farmers and manufacturing workers to becoming more productive, to better educate workers and self-employed in urban areas, making its exports such as copper, gold, garments, and wood products more internationally competitive, and ensuring that the benefits coming from national growth will be shared broadly. Still priorities. Externally, considering long historical ties with and entering ASEAN at the same year with Myanmar, Laos will utilize its capacity to encourage Myanmar to voluntarily adhere to the 5 points consensus. So the way of thinking is different between Indonesia with regards to Myanmar and Laos. They have been there for thousands of years, living within the same peninsula, Indo-China region, China Sea. Externally, to uphold the already established strength of ASEAN, such as upholding key principles such as regionalism and multilateralism, support will work strongly to utilize ASEAN and the United Nations as a forum to justify its position as a peace-loving nation, which will help its international credibility as a respected country. Now come the challenges. Okay, thank you. The challenge is psychological. In this case, to develop a sense of confidence, because Laos replaced Indonesian chairmanship, while domestically facing macroeconomic instability and understanding ASEAN difficulties in dealing with growing tensions in the South China Sea. So that's the first one. The second one is again psychological. Even though ongoing trade and investment from China has brought added values in the areas of political, economic, social, and technological, however, the huge amount of debt coming from the 1,000-kilometer bullet train connecting Kunming to Vientiane may put Laos into an awkward position when it has to represent ASEAN in dealing with China. And then challenges, again psychological. As a landlocked country, Laos needs extra concentration to involve itself into issues such as zone of peace, freedom, and neutrality. The idea was developed during the Cold War, and Laos came to ASEAN soon after the Cold War. And then the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia. And the third one is the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Laos is a landlocked country. It may understand UN clause, but what Connie Francis once said, your lips may be near, but where is your heart? And finally, the Treaty on the Southeast Asian Nuclear Weapon-Free Zone. And finally, the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. I think Laos needs to work harder. And then these are the challenges. And finally, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Teuku Reza Shah. Really insightful explanation on Laos' situation right now, especially with the priorities, internal priorities, external priorities, and also psychological challenge that Laos probably has in dealing with their position as chair of ASEAN this year. We'll get back to you later, Pak Teuku Reza Shah, and now I would like to give the floor to Pak Fitra Faisal. Pak Fitra Faisal, besides becoming a lecturer at the Economics Department at Universitas Indonesia, Pak Faisal once also served as a senior advisor and official spokesperson for the Minister of Trade, and served as executive director of the Next Policy. And Pak Fitra obtained his PhD in International Economics and Master of Arts from Waseda University, and also Master of Science Economics from Keio University, both in Japan. Pak Faisal, I'll give the floor to you right now. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Prof. Reza, and Andrew. Okay, allow me to stand here because I don't have my laptop with me today. So, because actually Pak Sofwan is supposed to be here, so I only have limited time to prepare my slides, but I hope it will be beneficial for. I used to, use this perspective because, with stories you can understand. So the tale of ASEAN, Laos. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay. I second in terms of countries, this is landlocked. In my field, international economics, used to have the so-called gravity equation. If we are trying to measure the bilateral relation, the bilateral trade and investment among countries, we usually have this equation, gravity equation. As the Newtonian model suggests, gravity force, gravity equation, it is actually well adopted in international economics. So we have the determinant factors. We have size and we have distance. When we focus more on the variable distance, so much so that it's not only distance, but is it landlocked or is it not? So you can see the variables here. When it is landlocked, you cannot trade. You don't have seas. You don't have any, gains and potential gains from trade because you're landlocked. You're amongst Vietnam, China, Thailand. You don't have anything. You have your land, yes, but you're very much on your neighboring countries have independency. I remember one time when I was serving ADBI Institute in Tokyo, I was serving under Chalongpop Susankar. Chalongpop Susankar is the ex-Minister of Finance in Thailand in 2007, if I'm not mistaken. But in 2011, he was actually the chief for a study that is called ASEAN 2030 Studies. He said to us, the associate researcher, he said that when you're seeing ASEAN, when you're seeing individual member countries in ASEAN, it's actually we're focusing more on ASEAN, not on individual basis, not on the countries. In that perspective, ideally speaking, it's not important. It's not important when you're seeing Laos as Laos, because it's not important if it is landlocked or not. You're seeing Laos as a part of ASEAN. Yes, it is landlocked, but you're not seeing Laos. Next. So, in the light of that, I'd like to tell you another story. The story of Mahabharata, the original version, not the Japanese version. Because it's quite different. Yeah. In the Mahabharata original version, Draupadi serves 5 Pandava. The Pandava, 5 noble warriors called Pandava. Yudhishthira, Bhima, Nakula, Sadewa, Arjuna. Right? Husbands of Draupadi. 5 noble warriors, big, powerful warriors. Draupadi, of course, she's also goddess, but it's not as powerful as these 5 noble warriors. Draupadi becoming a hub. How is it different from the Japanese version? The Japanese version, Draupadi only serves to Yudhishthira, right? Different. But the original version, this is actually the mirror of ASEAN. When you're seeing Draupadi, you're seeing actually the story of ASEAN. You're connecting people, connecting great powers. You're talking not only ASEAN, but you're talking beyond ASEAN. Because that is currently happening today. Next. ASEAN as the epicentrum of growth, facing a geopolitical tensions, the UNCTAD in 2022 mentioned this as the friendshoring. You have 2 geopolitical poles, the East and the West. Although it's somewhat different from what we had before, this is some kind of multipolar geopolitical conflicts. What we have quite polar. We have US, we have Russia, but now we have US and France, we have China and France. 2 political poles, or 2 we can see it as the multipolars. Friendshoring. With the friendshoring activities, so I might actually want to go back to the pandemic period. At that time, I told the Minister of Trade, when I was serving as the minister, the official spokesperson, I told the Minister that, Pak Menteri, we are now facing a potential of a potential benefit that is actually emerging from China factor, and the second is the relocation factor in the pandemic period. In the pandemic period, as you remember, was actually, avoid recession. What is a recession? Recession when you have 2 periods in sequence having a negative growth, but China avoided that period. 1 period, 1 quarter of negative growth, and then rebound for the second quarter. So, grew much faster than the overall region. But China has a problem because that kind of growth was stipulated by the demand. So the demand overshoot, but the input of production was lagging. So at that time, I told the minister that we'll be entangled with ASEAN is even more because we have the input of production, China factor. The second part is the can I have a well-functioning mic, please? Because when you're talking, telling a story, yeah. Okay. Where was I? Okay. The relocation factor. The relocation factor coming from the US, the EU, and also Japan. So they're seeing that focusing too much to China, although it's actually a very efficient global production network, in it's not only in the region, but globally speaking, China is the most efficient production network. Yes, it is efficient, but it is not resilience. You don't have a resiliency there, because too much focus on just one country. Don't put your eggs into one basket. That is actually the paradigm of making portfolio investment, right? So, in that sense, because the US, Japan, EU were seeing China is posing a greater risk for the global production network, so they are also moving to ASEAN. So we have two, China factor and also the relocation factor. Even the Prime Minister Abe at that time, when he announced the fiscal stimulus, the second largest in the world, yeah, and he said that, I paraphrase, with this fiscal stimulus, the world-class fiscal stimulus, I'm going to use this. This is a very, straightforward statement from a Japanese, because I live in Japan for 6 years. I know Japanese is just like Japanese. It's not straightforward. But Prime Minister Abe said the most straightforward statement. We are going to relocate our factories out from China, seeking for other alternatives. ASEAN. So, from that, so we have later the Russia versus Ukraine. We have also now the Israel versus the rest of the world. We are now seeing that this friendshoring activities are becoming more and more, divided. We have the decoupling throughout the world. But with also ASEAN, we are actually trying to apply to the OECD. The BRICS is also telling us to join. Prabowo visited China and then Japan. No worries. ASEAN, neutrality, ASEAN as the epicenter of growth, that will create resiliencies. Because one enemy is just too much. 1,000 friends is just too limited, too little. Next. Okay, so I will tell you a bit of my 3 books: Trade Strategy in East Asia, Globalization, Productivity and Production Network in ASEAN, and forthcoming book in June, The Economic Resurgence in ASEAN, all published by Palgrave Macmillan. Next. So, what is actually the motivation of these noble warriors entering ASEAN? Because they want to actually, pushing the global production network, because they need ASEAN. Next. Although we are actually going together, but next, not at the same pace. Yeah. If you're trying to see the participation order, yeah, whether or not we are actually have enough participation in the global or regional production network, and Indonesia, in the perspective of Indonesia, left behind, right? So we have several countries, different variation of pace, right? So we are the same. We are about one brand, but different pace. Next. Okay, the one that differentiate the pace, is the condition of the to the macro level. I can actually classify this as infrastructure, soft infrastructure and hard infrastructures. Okay. We have the labor, the innovation capacity, the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure. Next. That differentiate us in order to escape from the middle income trap. The typical innovation stage, yeah, we have Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, initial condition. We have also Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam in learning pace. Catch-up pace, Malaysia, advanced, no, we don't have. But frontier, Singapore, so different pace. Singapore is leading the pack. You're not at the same pace. Although we are trying to become one brand, but not at the same pace. So we cannot have this one brand because we are not united enough. In terms of intra-regional trade share, I remember Surin Pitsuwan in 2011 when I was in World Bank Tokyo. He actually he made a teleconference at that time and was actually targeting in 2015 we're going to have 30% of intra-regional trade share, but voila, you have what nowadays? It's only 24-25%. We are not that well connected in terms of economy. We are serving others, but we are not serving ourselves. So there's actually a problem of ASEAN. Next. Okay, just because I have limited time. Next. Now, institution and human capital matters. What is actually institution? Taking from the World Bank, we have the voice and accountability, and then we have the political stability, rule of law, government effectiveness, control of corruption. All is actually very, the very, foundation to participate and to grow together, to create ASEAN as the epicentrum of growth. Whether it's actually forward participation and backward participation, to make it simple, whether you are going to participate in the global production network, whether you are actually trying to utilize the ASEAN and ASEAN Plus production network, it depends on your institutions. The second, it depends also from human capital. Next. Because this will determine your absorptive capacity. Take, for example, Indonesia. We have investment all the way. But you know what? It's not for us. In Maluku, in Sulawesi, we have investments. We have industries, mining, nickel. But the poverty is still stagnating. Why? Because the labor is not compatible with the investment. Right? We don't have the absorptive capacity. But some say that, so, we are only serving China. We are only serving this. We are only serving the foreign investor. You cannot actually put blame to the investors. The investors are the one that actually using money. If I'm the investors, I want my project to be done. Right? I need skillful labor. If you cannot provide skillful labor, I will provide the labor from my own country. This is home bias hypothesis, which is quite correct, empirically proven. So you cannot blame China, you cannot blame Japan, you cannot blame the US. You need to blame yourself. How cannot you create labor compatibility? Right? So put the blame to us, not to the other. Next. So with that, we can actually invite more investment. With investment, we can create even more productivity. With productivity, we can create resiliency. So it's actually how it works, the transmission mechanism. It's not a rocket science. So you need to put efforts, but ASEAN is effortless. So in order to grow and grow together, we need to commit ourselves. Next. So in the case of intra-industry trade, low vertical intra-industry trade, horizontal intra-industry trade, and upper vertical intra-industry trade. So this is actually trying to tell you about where you are now, in the middle low of the global participation of the upper. Simply say that most of our interaction here in the lower part, the middle low, We are not reaching to the next stage of production. You're still in the middle because absorptive capacity, low skilled labor, low infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So we need to push even more. As a Muslim, I usually heard some khatib in Juma prayer. Yeah, say that utlubul ilm ila bisin. You need to learn from China. What happened with China? Akamatsu Flying Geese model in 1960s provide the second tier and third tier supports the Japanese production network, well supported by China and also South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and providing the second tier support groups, middle low. But what you have now, China and also South Korea, are even better than the Japanese, the original version of Japanese production network. They're coming from the middle low, and now they are on the higher ups. So we can learn from them how we can utilize the geopolitical tension, the benefits of geopolitical tensions. Innamal al-yusri yusra. When you have difficulties, you have also potential gain, right? In that ASEAN, because we are neutral, we are in the middle. We are making friends with the US, we are also making friends with China. So we can actually absorb all of the potential incoming investments, right? So, yeah, absorbing is one thing, but to maintain the investment is the other thing. Okay, so that we need to do. Next. So, as a conclusion, we are now seeing ASEAN as vibrant, but vibrant is, okay, yeah. ASEAN in 1990s were also vibrant. Now it's still vibrant, but we cannot do anything with our, foundation. ASEAN as neutral, ASEAN as epicentrum of growth. It was always stated year after years and after years. So we need to utilize, yeah. And we need to actually, push this Drupadi. ASEAN is the son of God, like Drupadi. So we can connect even the greater powers. We can benefit from the current geopolitical tensions, the friend sharing activities. Economic resurgence, as my forthcoming book suggests, is valid, but we need to maintain the momentum. As a runner, I have one of my idol, Dave Goggins. Dave Goggins is ex-Navy SEAL from the US. He ran every day, yeah. Even when he broke his leg, still running. You need to have that grit. Stay hard, and we can survive. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the tale, Pak Fitra. Well, as for your information, Pak Fitra seems to have to leave earlier from here. So Pak Fitra will have to leave at 3 p.m., which is it's 10 minutes to go. And if we have time, we shall involve you in a question and answer, Pak Fitra. If the time does not allow, I would like to invite you all to address your question personally to Pak Fitra in regards to this presentation through personal channels, or you can also visit his website on fitrafaisal.com. So hopefully the time will allow, Pak Fitra. And now we are going to our third speaker here, Mas Andrew. Mas Andrew has been working with official and academics in providing training and workshops related to foreign and security affairs, also conduct studies and formulate policy recommendation for various foreign policy stakeholders. And he obtained his bachelor's degree in international relations from Universitas Indonesia in 2008, and a master's degree in international relations from S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore in 2012. Mas Andrew, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Lutfi. Pansori. one is in. Thank you again for Habibie Center for inviting us. Actually, Mbak Fifi or Mbak Lina should be here, but they cannot make it. And I'm trying to replace my boss to speak about geopolitical challenges in ASEAN in 2024 as faced by Laos as ASEAN chair. I'll have 12 slides and then try to be quick if it's possible. I should stop my stopwatch. First, this is this is the terms of reference that have been given to us in CSIS to talk about at least 3 issues here. First is on key regional challenges faced by ASEAN and Laos as chair, and the current state of intra-regional issues, for example, Myanmar and South China Sea, and what would be the ASEAN position with regards to the ongoing US-China rivalry. But I would have to add one more points here by describing the state of ASEAN, especially highlighting the result of last year Indonesia Chairmanship and what would be the baton that has been passed to Laos as ASEAN chair. And for the first point, and I think this is also the consensus among various international experts, ASEAN experts, in describing the sort of geopolitical challenges faced by the region today. First, we have in CSIS, we tend to name this as flashpoints in the region, the key disputes in the region that probably could have the game-changing effect to the regional dynamics. First, of course, is South China Sea. The latest development that we had last year when Indonesia was chair, just a few days or a few weeks before the ASEAN Summit in Jakarta, China published the new map, which is the developing from 9-dash line to 10-dash line. And it comes with the question whether China is increasingly assertive in the South China Sea and how ASEAN should respond, and whether ASEAN would be united in responding to these challenges. That would remain questions. And various experts also discuss about the possibility of 2027 conflict between China and Taiwan, since Beijing has declared by 2027 they would have the military capability to seize Taiwan. And many people try to build the war game scenario about the possibility if the cross-strait relations between China and Taiwan erupted to become a regional conflict, and what would be the cases. And by the latest missile and nuclear trial by North Korea, we believe that North Korea has become the nuclear state. And that would also render various strategy, especially as usually adopted by US and Korea, and to be changed in the near future. They don't have, I think that the biggest strategic objective is not to change the intention of the North Korea from having the nuclear weapon, but to deal with the North Korea as a nuclear state. Also, the latest situation in the region is that this is the reality now. We are having the Indo-Pacific region as the region where acceleration of military spending is happening. The biggest spender by 2023 is actually China, followed by Japan, South Korea, and Australia. Interestingly, Indonesia is decreasing. I don't know why. We don't know why. Maybe we know. We can discuss about this later, but we have to bear in mind that there are notable states including Australia, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan has proposed its largest ever defense budget. So if we are looking at these figures, then we have a region, probably a region that could be characterized by the one that is prone to competition. So the competition between US and China, if not managed well, can erupt in an open conflict. So the biggest task for ASEAN, if any, to deal with this sort of geopolitical challenges is to make sure that this competition is being well managed to prevent any open conflict. And the next question is whether ASEAN is enough. We have to remember that ASEAN remains an intergovernmental institution. So many things still decided by the national countries, and because it is still decided by national countries, then it will boil down to the question whether each national countries in ASEAN have the political will and have the necessary resource to be mounted to the level of the region. And now at the regional level, at the national level, we have some sort of certain political instability. There are uncertainties, future of government in various countries, for example, Thailand and Vietnam. We know that there have recently been cases that some of the top officials of the countries has been detained of the corruption cases. That would leave the region with quite a relatively few stable government. Indonesia managed to come out of the election. How are we going to assess it? It comes back to all of us. And Malaysia is still also relatively stable now, and of course Singapore would have the new government. But the sort of question about stability is marked by the question whether the U.S. would have continuity in terms of strategic approaches to the region, because we don't know what would become the result of the next election. Many people has already started talking about the possibility of another Trump presidency, and we don't know what would happen to the region if Trump becomes the president again. As the past has already told us, Trump's presidency means uncertainty, so we don't know what would happen in the next future. And this sort of task that is faced by ASEAN also come with the greater structural reality that we have an extension of rivalry between the US and China that has transformed into the question of what sort of regional architecture that these different countries are trying to build. Of course, ASEAN would prefer to have the ASEAN-led architecture where ASEAN remains in the driver's seat. We have the East Asia Summit and ASEAN Regional Forum, which are the forum where possible competing powers in the region can sit together. And the forum is mainly multilateral with the sort of diplomatic practice as described by ASEAN way. But at the same time, US is trying to build their own security architecture. They always, in the past, rely on the sort of hub and spoke relationship with that place Washington at the center of the a series of bilateral relations between America and its partners, including allies and strategic partners in the region. But then the new difference now is that they are trying to build the sort of unilateral network, which is taking form in various initiatives, for example, Quad and AUKUS. And for us, at least in Indonesia, the biggest question is whether AUKUS and Quad would become the threats to the sort of regional form and architecture that initially have been established by ASEAN. At the same time, China is also trying to build their own architecture. It is mainly bilateral, using Belt and Road Initiative and Extended Global Security and Global Development Initiative as the preferred sort of international model. What is left for ASEAN? For ASEAN, at least the convergence now, if any, between ASEAN countries, every countries in ASEAN, all 10 ASEAN member states, are all togetherly seeking for regional autonomy and national autonomy. They want to build a sort of agency to ensure that stability is being reached. Many people describe this situation in different sort of concept. Like, for example, Cheng Chui Kwik from Malaysia, he described the situation as the hedging strategy adopted by various ASEAN countries. But at least there are three fundamental character of that proof convergence between these all 10 ASEAN member states. First, all ASEAN member states tend to hedge over sectoral interests. Hedging is actually the national strategy, and they rely on ASEAN as convening power, and at the same time they explore bilateral ties with major powers. But the problem is with these sort of questions, are they enough to equip ASEAN with certain kind of ability to deal with geopolitical challenges? Because of what? Because at least for these 4 issues, ASEAN can no longer rely on the sort of business as usual. At least the last 2 years proved to us that if the case is Myanmar crisis, we know that ASEAN is somewhat slow in terms of making progress. It took 3 months between the coup d'etat happened in Myanmar until ASEAN can actually agree to have the 5-point consensus. 3 months for conflict management and for conflict prevention measures is somewhat slow. So there have to be a reform in the way that ASEAN embarks to ASEAN adopt the decision-making process. And ASEAN clearly has any stipulation in the charter about crisis management. So basically, ASEAN didn't know what to do, and we can discuss about that later. And for this particular matter, ASEAN need to change. In terms of South China Sea, many people, we have CSIS conducted a workshop on January this year, and in the workshop, there is one of starking sort of convergence among different experts to say that the ongoing code of conduct process is actually myth-making. So many people still believe that if ASEAN continues the process, you mean that we can understand that there are some cooperative measures in dealing with South China Sea process, but at the same time, we also know that it's not going anywhere. As probably welcomed by the latest ASEAN Foreign Minister statement, there have been some progress in terms of the 3rd reading of the draft of the COC, but we never know what it is actually being discussed in ASEAN meeting. And it comes to the question whether ASEAN is still legitimate to deal with South China Sea process. The biggest concern for countries like Malaysia or Indonesia today is the fact that Philippines is getting closer to the United States, and whether Manila is still interested in using ASEAN within their own strategic documents or even outlook. Become a more apparent question now. Would Philippines still rely on ASEAN to deal with South China Sea issues? That becomes a million-dollar questions. On maritime and cybersecurity, it proves like this looks like a new area of cooperation. The nature of these two cooperation is first and foremost multidimensional. But if you ask, for example, as a dialogue partners, how can they approach ASEAN to have a more effective cooperation within maritime and cybersecurity domain? Of course, the first question from ASEAN is which sectoral body that you would like to work with. Because at least in ASEAN, you have the SOMTC that deal with, for example, piracy, illegal fishing and so on and so forth, but you also have the ASEAN Maritime Forum, and then you have another forum on Coast Guard, for example. There are fragmentation in the way ASEAN can deal with these new issues, and they still have not come up with an effective way of coordination between these cross-pillar agencies. And last but not least is actually ASEAN expansion to Timor-Leste. They have become a question whether there have been consistency of principles. We know that a president of Timor-Leste has accused Myanmar for undermining the principle of human rights, and that become a major question whether Myanmar later would block the sort of early adoption of Timor-Leste into ASEAN membership, and whether there would be enough political will to ensure that Timor-Leste become on the same level of playing field. We still don't know what would like to expect from the situation. How ASEAN deal with that? At least what Indonesia did last year. Whether these changes has successfully been tackled by Indonesia last year. And this is actually the summary of last year deliverables made by Indonesian government. I would like to say that the last year achievement is somewhat incremental and not radical enough. If the changes is the one that we needed as written in the previous slide. For example, Indonesia has begun to reform ASEAN by initiating an initiative called strengthening ASEAN effectiveness and institutional mechanism. But what were the result? First, there have been some fix in terms of the length of time that ASEAN should take should any crisis happen in the region. The new document, the so-called rules of procedures for decision making, said that ASEAN should adopt a decision within 7 days. But whether this document become mandatory or legally binding, we still don't know, because it remains the rule of procedures. It doesn't change the actual ASEAN Charter, because at the end of the day, ASEAN Charter says that everything, if it falls within the political sensitive issues, then the leader should take the decision. And then during the last year chairmanship, ASEAN has also agreed to transform the ASEAN Secretariat into ASEAN headquarters. And we still don't know whether the new so-called headquarters can actually engender the new institutional reform within ASEAN. What we don't want is by renaming ASEAN Secretariat to ASEAN headquarters, it only remains the new name of the building, not the new name of the institutions. We can discuss about this later. Review on the review on 5-point consensus, they have been they agreed to adopt ASEAN Troika, and they agreed to skip Myanmar and give later chairmanship to Philippines in 2026. Troika, after until this month, May, we have never heard anything about how Troika is being implemented. We know that the special envoy has been appointed by Laos, but whether this special envoy by Laos has well coordinated with Malaysia and Indonesia, we still don't have enough information. On ASEAN 2045, there would be the new vision, and it's clear that Laos is also preparing to come up with some standing documents that would complete the new vision on ASEAN vision after 2025. And they agree on core elements. But can we expect that ASEAN become a new sort of ASEAN community? I don't think so. There would not be any radical change in the way the ASEAN community are being established. On epicentrum of growth, this is actually the Indonesian result. They proposed the new concept, resilience, future growth. We can discuss about this later in the next slide. And on maritime cooperation, Indonesia initiated a new platform to at least ensure that ASEAN Maritime Forum establish ASEAN Maritime Outlook annually. And they initiate Coast Guard Forum. On South China Sea, they agreed on guidelines and standalone statement at the end of the year of 2023 on maritime domain. Not necessarily on South China Sea, but we know that it's related to South China Sea. And on ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, they have the sort of ASEAN Indo-Pacific Forum, and Laos has agreed to continue that and make the forum as an annual ASEAN event. And the new concept of defense version of ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific has been agreed. But how are we going to assess this achievement? This is the study that we did in CSIS after all deliverables has been issued by last year. And this is very technical. But the conclusion of these figures is that there have been some, if you draw the graph, there have been some decrease in the way various theme on regionalism has been adopted. In other words, ASEAN become less ambitious in pursuing the sort of integration. Like for example, using if you look at the political theme of regionalism, we have been mounted up our game from Bali Concord 1 to Bali Concord 3 and to Bali Concord 2 and to 3, from solidarity to community and centrality. And in the Concord 4, we only talk about unity and resilience. In terms of economic concept, there have been some improvement in terms of regionalism from economic cooperation to economic integration in Concord 2 and CEP and macroeconomic coordination, but this term has been watered down in Concord 4, saying that ASEAN only pursue a macroeconomic policy mix, not coordination anymore. So it means that from this slide, we know that ASEAN cannot be expected, at least until last year, to have a big changes, and we can only expect incremental changes within ASEAN, if not lowest common denominator. Next slide. And the problem is, if you look at the last year theme, ASEAN epicentrum of growth, in the time when US-China competition developed from security into multiple areas of competitions, ASEAN seems to remain believing in their own initial principles that if you pursue economic cooperation, then security would be achieved. Or in other words, if you are in the international relations student, ASEAN still vehemently believe on cooperative and common security kind of approach. But the problem is now, if the competition between US and China become multidimensional, can we expect economic cooperation to become innocent and at the end of the day engender some sort of cooperative outlook among ASEAN states? There are three problems here. First, you know that since 2017, the national security strategy adopted by President Trump, there have been some strategic kind of approaches adopted by great power that is blurring boundaries between economic and security affairs. And the sort of compartmentalization that usually being adopted by ASEAN states who usually tend to hedge become a question now. And if you look at the previous slide, ASEAN can only achieve incremental progress. And in this sort of situation, then we can only expect that ASEAN can only agree on lowest common denominator. If you look at the changes that is needed, for example, to change the ASEAN way, to change the ASEAN political sort of decision making, it all requires political will. Can we expect ASEAN to have major political will if they have political instability at home, and if they can only agree on lowest common denominator? It remains I think very hard task for ASEAN. So this is also the example of workshop we conducted this year, and the question of the workshop is very simple: whether ASEAN is well equipped if the competition between US and China become open conflict. If you look at the way the ASEAN has been institutionalized so far, the simple answer is no. ASEAN is not well equipped enough to manage the situation if the competition become open conflict. What ASEAN can do is actually to maintain and promote peace. The first level, all the blue color box in the slide, you can see that this is actually where ASEAN has already have sufficient institutional equipment to deal with that. For example, to deal with interstate conflict, ASEAN can usually use ASEAN sectoral bodies to promote cooperation. To deal with interstate conflict, they have TAC, ASEAN norms, ASEAN way. It works well if the conflict is between one ASEAN member to another against ASEAN member states. But it doesn't work if the conflict is between one ASEAN member state against an extra regional power. So you have, if the task is, for example, to create an early warning system in the region, ASEAN have a big homework. I can discuss about that later. And if this, the need is actually to come up with a better crisis management, ASEAN cannot have anything within its hand to deal with the major conflict between, if, for example, it involves Philippines with China, if it involves Indonesia with, I don't know, US or China maybe, or it involves, or if it involves conflict between US and China in open way. So what is needed to do? Can we expect Laos to deal with that? So if to change ASEAN, at least there are three levels of problem. you have to address the capacity problem, and then you have to address the sort of institutional framework to pursue, and you have to deal with the power constraint. In terms of capacity problems, we can discuss about this later, but at least 3 questions. Are there enough capability from each ASEAN member states? Is there enough political will? And can actually ASEAN come up with a better resource mobilization plan? Like, for example, if the situation between China and Taiwan become an open conflict, you have at least 350,000 Indonesian citizens working in Taiwan that needs to be evacuated. And then you have also hundreds thousand of Philippines nationals. This is the situation where Indonesia should work closely with Philippines to evacuate their citizens. But whether Indonesia have the equipment, whether Philippines have the equipment, whether Indonesia and Philippines can work together, and whether there would be some sort of regional platform to enable them to work together, that is another question. So resource mobilization, and how do you resolve the question of sovereignty and compliance if after they agree to have a major cooperative framework? That remains a big question. An institutional framework, should we change the ASEAN Charter? It remains a question. Or can we actually change ASEAN by only introducing the sort of incremental changes as Indonesian government did last year? And the last but not least question is how to deal with the power constraint. Will outside power support, for example, if ASEAN want to translate ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific to a more concrete strategy? Can they work together with ASEAN, or would they only prefer working from their already built sort of platform? Like, for example, if we want US to cooperate more with ASEAN, would they directly go to ASEAN, or would they use Quad and AUKUS instead? We don't know what would become the question of that. And will outside power veto any kind of cooperation if ASEAN choose to do so? The biggest question here is on South China Sea. If ASEAN manage to introduce their own single voices on South China Sea, will China veto that using their proxy in the region, for example, Cambodia and Laos? And for the conclusion, with this reality that ASEAN and capacity that ASEAN is facing now, I think Laos chairmanship best. What we can expect today is to continue this sort of incremental changes, and the best outcome that we can expect from them is to come up with a follow-up document to establish the new vision of ASEAN 2045. But if the task is to ensure that ASEAN has the sort of unity and centrality in dealing with the region, if the region become an open conflict, I think that would become insurmountable task for Laos. And with that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Andrew, for really comprehensive remark and I would say presentation, explanation on geopolitical challenge that in ASEAN and what Laos has to actually encounters during its chairmanship. Before we are going to the question and answer session, I would like to just open this session. I have a question actually, specifically to both Pak Reza and Mas Andrew. To Pak Reza, like my friend on the operating table, can I ask for the help to direct the presentation to Pak Reza's presentation on, you know, Laotian quotations, the 2 quotations that Pak Reza given on the slide number 5, I believe. Yeah. And this is interesting with the one with the crows and the vultures. Live with the vultures, become a vulture. Live with the crows, become a crow. And putting that into context of the Laotian chairmanship in ASEAN, Pak Reza, who is whom? I mean, like, who follows whom? Is it Laos following the ASEAN or ASEAN following Laos? I mean, like, Laos have this priorities, has this psychological challenge that we have mentioned earlier. It's quite a homework for Laos as well to follow up what happened and the situation in ASEAN right now. So put that quotation into context of Laotian chairmanship, who is whom? Who follows whom?
In answering this question, we need to go back to 19 1995, when Vietnam joined ASEAN. At the time, Vietnam, and until today, remains there's a term called top dog and underdog. Is it still, do we still hear it today? Top dog and underdog. Top dog means the one who bark and the rest will follow. At that time, Vietnam was the top dog. Vietnam, 1995, was eager to enter ASEAN because ASEAN provided opportunities. For example, markets, global markets. Vietnam began to understand open liberalization, and then Vietnam at the time had only limited relationship with China. Even they had war at the border. And Vietnam saw that ASEAN provided a golden passport. We see immediately, even before Vietnam officially became full member of ASEAN, the West managed to speed up all kind of diplomatic relations because it was quite awkward to see the US president coming to the ASEAN Summit, but the US president had no relation, but the US had no relation with Vietnam. So within less than 3 months, all of a sudden, Vietnam had good relations with the US and then the Western financial institutions. So Vietnam has provided Laos a lesson that we can learn from ASEAN. So in this case, it was very hard for Laos at the beginning to be part of ASEAN. Yeah? The commitment was there, but for ASEAN countries, the sooner they became the member of ASEAN, the better. Before, especially Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar became the proxy of China. Indonesia was among the first country to invite Myanmar to join in. Even though the West said, "Hi, Indonesia, how could you ask Vietnam to join in?" Even they have no facsimile there. Well, back to Laos. In my opinion, the philosophy is there. But ASEAN is unique here. Because if we compare with the countries in the East Asian, I think I recall the statement issued by our teacher, Pak Andrew Mantong, Professor Kishore Mambubani. He said that when it comes to economic level of cooperation, ASEAN is at this level. And East Asian countries, China, Japan, and South Korea, is at this level. Ideally, countries who are at this level, they should behave like the European Union. But they cannot. Why? Because traditional conflicts remain there. And then, strangely, when it comes to political security cooperation, ASEAN is there, here, and East Asian is here. Meaning, there is something East Asian countries need to learn from ASEAN. For Professor Kishore, he mentioned the secret of ASEAN, what make ASEAN has a capacity to glue all countries inside, is the principle of consensus and consultation. This is the strength of ASEAN. And I think Laos has understood that once it becoming a member of ASEAN, we didn't ask the political system. Yeah. At first, during the Cold War, we asked, or we mentioned behind the scene that you have to be non-communist. But once we had Vietnam, the question of political ideologies became less relevant. Because if we see the Bangkok Declaration, there is an article saying that at one day, countries in the Indochina will be part of ASEAN. And then what make countries in the Indochina happy, it was Adam Malik, on the 8th of August. He was the one who said that foreign military bases should be taken out of ASEAN countries. So countries in the Indochinese region became happy to see ASEAN. So when Laos joined in, we didn't force Laos to speed up with all regulations and procedures. We had AFTA already. Yeah, we began to talk about CEPT. We began to talk about BIMP EAGA. We began to talk about Outer Islands cooperation. We didn't push Laos. So when Laos joined in, they found that ASEAN is a home. They could voluntarily become part of ASEAN and heaps of capacity building. Among others, this is the good thing of ASEAN. Once they show inclination to join, we provided capacity building. For example, for countries like Brunei Darussalam in 1984, we can see this theoretical answer in the book written by Professor Donald Weatherby in the ASEAN Survey 1984. It talked about the way we helped prepare Brunei. For example, when it comes to capacity building, inside the Malaysian delegation at the UN or at the Commonwealth head of government meetings, they had Bruneian diplomats there. In the same way, Bruneian diplomats were also with the Singapore delegation to learn the code of conduct, the rules and regulations, and how to draft. We prepared that. I had the luxury of visiting Laos here sometime in year 2018. People from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said it was tough. The learning process was tough. But Laos is a learning society. Look at the left proverb. A tray full of money is not worth a mind full of knowledge. Laos understood that in order to become a full member of ASEAN, they learn from ASEAN and they also understand that our culture is not a lecturing culture. Our culture is in Japanese we call it asih, asah, and asuh. Yeah? We work together, we nurture together, we progress together. Laos really enjoyed this. And then they find that ASEAN is so peaceful and there is so many procedures aimed to help Laos speed up in the future. We didn't force Laos that within 5 years' time you should reduce your tax from 5% to 1%. No, we let Laos do it voluntarily, and then I think today Laos is happy inside ASEAN. Laos had become ASEAN chair for two times, yeah. And then I think they have had enough mentality to learn with ASEAN, to work with ASEAN, because in ASEAN we do not, regardless of big and small, none of us have the last word to say. This is ASEAN. I think I learned this from Professor, a Singaporean guy again, Rajaratnam. Yeah. He was the one who said, inside ASEAN, regardless of big or small, rich or less rich, we produce consent. We work based on consensus and consultation. So I think Laos, inside ASEAN, considering the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, we do not have a capacity to push Laos. We have reached a level inside ASEAN, with our fellow countries in Indochina. We have reached a level, something called, in Japanese we call it ngono yongono ning jongono. We understand how you feel. We understand how you feel. You also understand how I feel. We thought I have to say that. So this is the influence of the Japanese culture into ASEAN. Yeah? Among other, we call each other Bapak and Pak Sekjen. Yeah? And I think Laos, when it comes to Myanmar issue, I think they have a very long tradition. They have long history. But I think, well, in the past we tend to put pressure on Thailand. Why did you work on your own dealing with the Myanmar issue? You didn't share the story with ASEAN countries. I think it's about time for us to give leverage to Laos. Laos, they came into ASEAN at the same day. But I think Laos has a better knowledge on Myanmar compared to other ASEAN 5. I think, even though I know the problems faced by Laos at the moment, but I have a good hope that Laos could lead ASEAN this year. Thank you, Pa.
Thank you, Pa Reza. And now, Pa Reza has mentioned about ASEAN has been, it has been the ASEAN chairs in 2016. I would like to go to Andrew on that and connected to the geopolitical challenge that Laos probably is facing right now. What kind of is there? Can you point out what the lessons that Laos has from its chairmanship in 2016? I mean, we have the South China Sea already at that time, and U.S. is having this election as well in 2016. Do you have any relevant lessons learned from Laos? We are in midway of their chairmanship in 2024 right now for the rest of its chairmanship until the end of 2024.
After ASEAN agreed to have the sort of ASEAN community vision, the follow-up document was called the Vientiane Plan of Action. So I think they would like to build on that legacy again. Not as Indonesia, who choose to depart from the usual strategy, because we used to call the old ASEAN Concord as Bali Concord. But since last year the summit was held in Jakarta, we tend to move away from the tradition. But I think Laos is somewhat ambitious to expect that there would be some major document issued by their chairmanship that is called after their names. So that is one thing. And the last chairmanship, Laos managed to somewhat answer to the sort of skepticism, since we know that in 2012 or 2011, 2012 that ASEAN failed to reach some sort of joint communique with the belief that the China has influenced Cambodia to prevent that sort of unified voices on South China Sea and so on and so forth. But Laos managed to have a quite moderate statement on South China Sea, and we expect that it would become another sort of standpoint. Lucky that Indonesia has managed to leave some legacy on South China Sea Code of Conduct process and on standalone statement on maritime stability. That could be used by Laos just to bandwagon what has been agreed last year in order to create some sort of new consensus. And for that particular purpose, I think there is no reason not to expect that Laos could not do it. For example, the potential that Laos can do is actually to tell to its ASEAN counterparts that they used to become the young member of ASEAN, and they didn't go through meticulous some sort of process to be accepted as a fully functioning ASEAN member state. And this approach should also be taken by ASEAN to include Timor-Leste as the new members. So if Laos didn't face the sort of difficulties to join ASEAN as a member, so does Timor-Leste. So you cannot not be fair to Timor-Leste to ask them for some certain capacity level to join ASEAN, because Laos didn't actually go to that process. And this some sort of consistency is actually important for Laos to play some sort of agency. But beyond that, if the task is actually geopolitical challenges, it's not only Laos problem, it's ASEAN problem, and it's also Indonesian problem. And whether we should use ASEAN to deal with the certain geopolitical situations, I don't even think that after the last chairmanship that Indonesia is interested enough to build ASEAN to the level of their being able to cope up with the new geopolitical challenges. My best hope for the government is by design to deal with the incremental changes achieved by the Indonesian government come out of the question of just simple muddling through or not really being planned, then probably that is not the best situations in the region now.
Thank you so much, Mas Andrew. And now, I would like to pull two questions from the audience and one question from YouTube, as we have quite a limited time right now. So, yeah, anyone have question, please mention your name, your affiliation, and if you have specific speakers whom you want to answer your question, please mention that. Yeah. First.
Yeah, I would like to thank you for this opportunity this given to me. My name is Indrian Sorandaru, and I'm from student think tank for Europe-Asia Relations, or STIR. So I'm here. I would like to ask about the geopolitical tension in South China Sea. So I think this question is for Mr. Matthew, Mas Matthew. And yeah, I would like to ask about what Mas Matthew before already explained about.
It's Andrew.
Sorry. Matthew. Andrew, yeah. Sorry. I forgot. So, Mr. Andrew, you already explained about the geopolitical tension in South China. You also explained that Filipina is getting closer to the United States in this case, and I would like to talk about saying this, that some ASEAN member states supporting or taking sides to US, and some other ASEAN member states taking side or supporting China. So that I would like to ask you about how can ASEAN actually be united or have a unified, I would say, standpoint or unified voice in order to balance, in order to deal with US-China rivalry in South China Sea. If some ASEAN member states taking side to US and some other ASEAN member states taking side to China, how can ASEAN be united to have unified standpoint or policy or established framework to balance US-China dominant influence in South China Sea in this case? Yeah, thank you. That's my question.
Thank you so much. We'll have another question from right there.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Hamzah Abdurrahman. I am from the State Islamic University of Syarif Hidayatullah Jakarta, UIN, Jakarta. I'm the international relations student. My question would be for Mr. Andrew Mantong, but if Mr. Reza would like to answer, it'll be welcome also. So my question is, as we probably know, Laos has a quite significant economic ties with China, right? And given Laos's economic ties with China and its high debt exposure, how will Laos manage its relationship with both China and the other ASEAN member states during its chairmanship? And what are the potential risks and opportunities that Laos and the ASEAN as a whole would probably face during Laos's chairmanship? Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hamza and Indria. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. We have one more question from YouTube. It's from Son Young, from Korean Mission to ASEAN, Republic of Korea Mission to ASEAN. She has three questions actually, two general questions and one for Andrew. The first one is, it is interesting, it is for Pareza actually. It is interesting to see psychological challenges that Lao PDR faces. Do you think psychological complexity prevents makes Laos hesitant to lead? That's the first question. And the second one, how about ASEAN's common voice on sensitive regional and international issues? The issues are not only limited to South China Sea, Myanmar, but also Israel and Hamas and Ukraine issues. And under Laos, there are only 2 ASEAN foreign minister statements issued so far on the earthquake in Japan and Myanmar, but not on other paramount issues like Israel and Palestine conflict. And the third one is for Andrew specifically, which asks, will Laos manage ASEAN's relatively strong position on North Korea like last year or less so? Will Laos make achievements to enhance ASEAN-led architecture like the ASEAN way? That's the question. Quite, really comprehensive question. But I would like to repeat all the questions. The first question from India, directed to Andrew, asking, some ASEAN member states are taking sides. How can ASEAN be united in giving a voice, especially when it comes to South China Sea issues and probably other issues as well? And the second question, also to Andrew, but I will ask Pareza's view on this as well. Laos has quite significant economic ties with China. How it could manage its relation with AMS and China during its chairmanship. So I would like to give the floor to Andrew first. Thank you.
First question on South China Sea. It really depends on how you perceive ASEAN and its relevance in the equation. If you there are 3 at least possible answers to that particular question. First is if you take the assumption that ASEAN is not important, then we should acknowledge that whatever ASEAN is doing is only myth-making, which the process of COC, Code of Conduct, is there to make and to convince at ASEAN that there are actually some sort of cooperative measures being taken, but it's not going anywhere. The thing to push the equation forward is to rest on the balance of power in the region. So you use whatever available at hands by the national governments to pursue a stronger position. The current situation in South China Sea, I believe, is that China is winning. Either now or in the near future, China is winning and they are ready to wage the sort of long game. What ASEAN need to do and the claimant states needs to do is to keep up the game. They pursue the sort of capacity building. They improve the national capability in terms of maritime apparatus, maritime equipment, and so on and so forth. At the same time, the sort of long game also would require the better sort of jurisprudence and legal claim to the equation. What ASEAN can do internally is to pursue some sort of bilateral agreement between them. Because we know that it's not a secret anymore that China is also benefiting from the fact that there is no united position among ASEAN member states. So if if you want to reach that level of consensus, you have to pursue series of bilateral delimitation between different ASEAN member states. It's like between Malaysia, Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia, and so on and so forth. And the biggest question is whether they have political will at the national level to pursue that. If you take the assumption, the second possibility, if you take the assumption that ASEAN is somewhat important and that COC level is actually should become the longer vision of ASEAN, I think the proposal have been proposed at least by experts like Rizal Sukma or last year by candidate President Ganjar, who said that there should be some interim agreement on COC at least to enable some effective stipulation that in the time when COC process has not reached into conclusion, you should really restrain from being from using the sort of coercive measures. Water cannon, laser is not possible if you able to reach this somewhat COC process. And of course, if you take the assumption that ASEAN is important, then the issue is finish the COC and revitalize the sort of ASEAN-led institutions. It means that you have to have if COC is being achieved, that is not the resolutions for the disputes. It's only to maintain the conduct between interested parties. And the long term of resolvement of these issues would really depend on how ASEAN can build a cooperative and conducive climate of cooperation between ASEAN itself and China, and also another state, like for example US as regional power. If you, in order to do that, you have to revitalize the East Asia Summit. You have to revitalize you have to adopt the process of conflict resolution that is adopted in ASEAN Regional Forum, and to become well adapted in other ASEAN-led mechanism. East Asia Summit so far has only focused on economic issues. We still yet to see the cooperation develop into more robust political security cooperation. But in order to do that, it's also become a bit, I'm a bit skeptical on this, because at least you have two different dynamics. The ASEAN maritime states, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, the usual the initial founder of ASEAN, they do really have very different geopolitical outlook as compared to the mainland ASEAN states. In order to enable this series of efforts, you have to make a convergence first between differences in geopolitical outlook between maritime ASEAN states and mainland ASEAN states. And yes, that would become my question. I hope it answered. That would become my answer. I hope it answers your question. On Laos-China economic ties, various people also believe that this become a burden for Laos. And the fact that they are having a huge debt with China would hamper their ability to have a strong agency as an ASEAN leader. The optimism also, of course, stems from the fact that, as Pareza mentioned, and I did mention in the last section, that there have been some success story as Laos proved in the past. And there have been also some sort of modalities that Laos can be used as embedded in ASEAN institutional habits, which also I think related to the third question. Can we expect ASEAN to come up with a strong voices on Israel-Hamas? They did actually in the last foreign ministry retreat in January. There have been some statement on Israel-Hamas. I think that would become easier because it's geopolitically distant from ASEAN. North Korea is not that distant from ASEAN. And can we expect ASEAN to come up with the similar position as last year? I think yes. If the benchmark is last year, that would be easy for Laos to follow the same language. At the end of the day, various results of ASEAN as an institutions rest on whether there have been some fixation in diplomatic language. So if the language is there, it can be easier for the next chair or for the next some sort of summit to adopt the same language. If the language is not existent as the previous one, then it would become harder. But let's say if we expect that the ASEAN can have a stronger some sort of institutional mechanism to deal with North Korea, I'm still skeptical. First, can we expect, like for example, North Korea to come to ASEAN Regional Forum? First and foremost, I think it's become hard to imagine. At least the best thing that we can expect for now, they can come up with a similar language as being adopted last year. And the factor here is really path dependency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mas Andrew. Pareza, would you like to add? We have how ASEAN can be united in giving a voice, especially to South China Sea issues, and how Laos can actually manage its relations with ASEAN member states and China when it comes to context of economic ties with China and its chairmanship in ASEAN this year, and also one question about how do you think psychological complexity makes Laos hesitant?
Thank you, Pak Moderator. I think statistics speak for itself. In terms of population, how much do you have people in Laos? Less than 10 million, isn't it? And China, they have 1.3 B. Meaning for one person in Laos, they have around 125 sisters, cousins, and so on in China. That's the one. And then economically, the economic size is so huge. No wonder Vietnam introduced a lot of programs called, narrowing the gap. Because Vietnam sees this. And then if you see the diplomatic presence all over the world, how many embassies do Laos have compared with China? Oh my God. If the UN has 193 countries today, how much do Laos have? I'm sure China has embassies and then consulate generals, consulates, and not to mention cities to city kind of cooperation. And then China has something called strategic partnership with all countries inside ASEAN, and not to mention ASEAN-China Free Trade Area. So in this case, if you put yourself in the shoes of Laos, Laos is trembling when it has to deal with China at the bilateral level, yeah. But also still at the regional level, if we all ASEAN has 675 million population, it is still half of China. So in this case, what the best thing Laos could do is to, in Japanese we call this waspodo purbo wiseso. Can people translate this into English? Or ngerti saat durunge winara. You need to anticipate what China can do to you. And then you need to maintain cautious. So in this case, luckily, Laos has learned a lot of best practices coming from Indonesia. Saying what Laos could do is not to challenge China, not to do unnecessary sentences, but to polish what Indonesia has been doing with regards to China. And then also with regard to the leadership inside ASEAN. Well, small doesn't mean weak. Laos is part of ASEAN, and Laos needs to learn from what ASEAN did in the past. In the past, under Indonesia, we opened our gates for international kind of cooperation. At one stage, we relied, when it comes to South China Sea, at the time, our knowledge on South China Sea was limited. And then at the time, we used to have Kabar Litbang, Head of Research and Development of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Pak Hasim Jalal, the father of Dino Jalal. He opened channel to CIDA, Canadian International Development Assistance, and CIDA gave its best experts to help train Indonesia and also ASEAN countries at the time. So at the time, we began to understand from the beginning. So this is China, this is how it looks, this is how China behaves itself, this is China, how it wants to be seen. China wants to be seen at the center of the world. No wonder Pak Prabowo visited China immediately, soon after the QuickCon was there. And then with regard to issues in Northeast Asia and also issues in Middle East, I could understand why the Laos position is low-key. Yeah, Laos understand the risks at the unilateral level if it acts wrongly. For example, when it comes to the issue of Hamas and Israel, the mood of opinion only happened in Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, yeah, and small part of the Philippines. So I think Laos is very clever. It knows how to behave. I think there are rooms for South Korea, because when we deal with South Korea, they always think what North Korea is doing over there. Yeah? I think when it comes to the solidarity for socialist aspiration, of course there are parallels between Laos and our brother and sister in DPRK. Yeah, I think Laos admire the ideas of Juche. Yeah, Juche in North Korea. The meaning of Juche is economic self-reliance and political independence. I think this is something, ideas from North Korea, which will inspire people in Laos. But anyway, Laos is a good learner. Education is there. The philosophy of the education is there. If in the context of ASEAN plus 3, I know there are competition between China, South Korea, and Japan. Yes, how not to lead by how to work in tandem with ASEAN countries. I think for South Korea, since the last 2 years, we witnessed something called KASI, Korea ASEAN Solidarity Initiative. It's about time for South Korea to fill in the gaps. If they can see that Laos needs special learnings, I think KASI is there. We have no question that South Korea is excellent when it comes to IT, digital technology, and then public diplomacy, and then big data intelligence. South Korea is there. I think it's about time for South Korea to help Laos in uplifting its leadership capacities here. And then what else do we have here? I think I've answered all of the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reza, for the answers. And we still have 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. I would like to have one more question from here, if anyone has. Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. I want to introduce myself. My name is Zaki. I'm from UIN Jakarta with International Relation major. I want to ask about ASEAN Economic Community and Natalagawa Doctrine. We know in understanding of the concept of collective security, Mr. Natalagawa once created a doctrine called dynamic equilibrium. Is this doctrine still relevant until today? And how does Laos plan to increase trade between ASEAN countries and create an ASEAN economic community? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the questions, Zaki. Is dynamic equilibrium still exists right now? Is it still relevant right now? And the second question is, how does Laos create the network with fellow ASEAN member states? Is that the question I understood? The second one, how to increase trade? Yeah, how to increase the impact and how to actually leverage the impact through trade and investment. Pak Reza, you start first.
Thank you, Pak. Zaki ya, dari Ciputat ya, Kampung Hutan ya. Oke, kan. Oh, Cirende, oke. Pak Marty is a man of ideas ya, Pak ya. A man of ideas. At one stage, when he was in the UN, he proposed our ambassador at that time how to restructure the UN, Pak. Yeah. Then the idea was called the Wisnumurti method. But from inside story, I heard that it was Pak Marty who proposed the idea, yeah, that the future of the UN should be reformed based on civilization, size, and then population, and then role as a peaceful nation on earth, and then model of the development. And with regards to dynamic equilibrium, Pak Marty is coming from West Java tradition, yeah. If you can see his name, yeah, Sunda. Do you know how the Sundanese way of thinking? No, the way they see the world. Yeah, we need to go to the wayang again. And luckily, our brother is not here. The Sundanese way of thinking is called 5 5UR, concentric. The first thing is awak sakujur, yourself. The second one is batur sakasur, your wife or your husband. And the third one is your wargi sadapur, the nuclear family. The fourth one is wargi sasumur, the extended family. And then the fifth one is the wargi salembur, from the household, from the community. So based on this, Pak Marty thinks on something called dynamic equilibrium. This is, if Pak Harto at the time meant call this as ketahanan nasional and ketahanan regional, a national resilience, regional resilience, and then continuous interaction between items inside with items outside. Yeah. So in this case, learning from Pak Harto's experience, we need firstly to develop national resilience. Ideological resilience, political resilience, economic resilience, socio-cultural resilience. No need to mention security resilience, because if we mention security, it will shock our brothers and sisters in the Indo-Chinese region. Security resilience will come as a bonus once all resilience are doing well. So I think this, Pak Marty was born sometime in 1960s. But he was in London at the time when Pak Harto was in power. And the dynamic, this is the unique thing of Indonesia, yeah. There is a term called babat alas, Pak. We tend to restructure something newer, and we do not think like the Chinese building the Great Wall, Pak. In China, regardless of who is the emperor, the Great Wall keep enlarge and strengthen. And we in Indonesia tend to invent the wheel, but we hardly hear the word dynamic equilibrium. But it is, I think, in the mind of the Indonesian strategic thinkers, we believe this, without having to say, that we need to maintain good relations with others. And then how to maintain relations? Well, start from the simple things. No need to go directly to have a treaty or a charter. Start from simple things. The theory calls constructivism and also regime. Try to develop regime as much as possible. This is what China has been doing. Relationship at the bilateral level may be not good, but mental relations between the leaders are there. And then, for example, relations could be done at the provincial level, state level, professional level. So this is what China has been doing. I think our dynamic equilibrium needs to be strengthened with stronger components learning from China. And then with regards to the ASEAN Economic Community, well, if we see the principles of the ASEAN Economic Community, we would like to make ASEAN a single production base, isn't it? We would like to make ASEAN more competitive in the global market. We would like to make ASEAN more integrated with the global market. But, okay, the ideas are there. Yeah? But if we look at the core of ASEAN, we need to ask ourselves why we tend to trade with outsiders more than we trade with each other. Why we do not, why we let foreign direct investment come to ASEAN, but less foreign direct investment coming from intra-ASEAN? Well, because we fellow ASEAN knows that we have problems with governance, isn't it? Look what is happening in Vietnam at the moment. Someone has had to go to meet the Lord earlier than expected, yeah? We know each other's. We know each other's problems, human rights, good governance, good corporate governance. And also inside ASEAN, even though we call ourselves part of the ASEAN Economic Community, but when it comes to individual countries, we compete against each other. We compete for direct foreign investment, and we keep providing better results compared to our competitors. We do this behind the scene. So no wonder a lot of Indonesian investors, Indonesian foreign investor left Indonesia and go to Myanmar, go to Cambodia, go to Laos, go to Vietnam, and their contribution, their GDP contribution is excellent. If we see that Vietnamese automotive, and also digital technology, they are mostly coming from South Korea. And then, if we would like to become a credible partner, a credible ASEAN Economic Community, we need to make ourselves familiar with modern norms. For example, digital economy, isn't it? Decision making, and then solid data bank, and then no discrepancies in export and import. Yeah, in Singapore you need hours, and in some ASEAN countries you need weeks. And then to licensing the building, in some ASEAN countries we still need weeks. In Singapore, less than a week. And then good governance in legal matters. Why most multinational corporations have bases in Singapore, not in the other ASEAN 9 countries? Because they learn that when it comes to legal matters, court, judges, more accountable in over there. So that's why we need to learn. How to learn? Well, if we learn from the advanced countries, there are something ASEAN should learn faster. In Western countries, they call it the 7 pillars of Western wisdom. First, education. Education, please be standardized, ASEAN standardized. And then secondly, science and technology. The thirdly is meritocracy. The fourth one is market economy. The fifth one is rule of law. Number 6, culture of peace. Number 7, pragmatism. Pragmatism means go to the root of the problem. No need to play with the wind. Go to the root cause of the problem. I think we ASEAN, we need to learn. Yeah, before we claim that we are an ASEAN economic community, but we need to improve ourselves. Not if we point ourselves to the others, 3 fingers pointing back to us actually. So we have homeworks. I think Laos, please lead us to uplift our standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Pareza. Sandy, do you have additional comments on the dynamic equilibrium and how ASEAN economic community can be leveraged?
If I can go back to my presentation, by looking into the series of changes from Bali Concord 1, Bali Concord 2, Bali Concord 3, and now ASEAN Concord 4, I really believe that ASEAN has become less ambitious in pursuing any sort of ASEAN economic community, if by community we mean integration. I don't think that ASEAN speaks any longer in terms of community, in terms of integration. They only speak community in terms of connectivity. So it leaves us to the biggest and largest agenda for the ASEAN economic community in terms of connectivity and resilience. And that already become what Indonesia started as with coining ASEAN Matter epicentrum of growth. But I really think that I'm not an economist. I think Pak Fitra should be better to answer this question. But I cannot help myself but to notice that the new buzzword is actually digitalization and connectivity, as if and every ASEAN member states really believe that the future, the key to the future is to come up with the connectivity, digitalization as the new sources of growth. But the problem with ASEAN, and not only ASEAN, Indonesia, Laos, and I think Indonesia included here, is there have become some sort of frustration in terms of finding the new sources of growth. And for Indonesia itself, it still remain a big question whether digitalization would actually become the new sources of growth. Well, means that someday Indonesia would come up with a better productivity, come up with a new innovation, and become the productivity innovation, then become the actual sources of growth. And the biggest question, I think, as acknowledged in the making of the ASEAN 2045 vision, is there are certain development gap between various ASEAN member states, and how to address this. This is not an answer, but this is also the question, a bigger question to the policymaker. Can you actually expect that pursuing connectivity projects and infrastructure projects, you can actually address development gap. And the problem is ASEAN so far does not come up with a certain grand ideas on how economics should be built. Instead, they come up only with a little and very technical solution to the problems. Last year, we already established a sort of a leader statement on making the electronic vehicle ecosystem in ASEAN. What we didn't know back then is when we talk about EV ecosystem, does we seek to become the regional hub of production? Does we seek to integrate the various regional factors of production to pursue any leap towards building electronic vehicle ecosystem or not? It remains a questions. We still have yet to see what would become the result of the agreed DEFA, Digital Economic Framework Agreement, but I suspect that since the nature of ASEAN is not actually integration, but the nature of ASEAN is interstate government cooperation, and the best thing that they can come up with Digital Economic Framework Agreement is to come up with some sort of benchmark. And let's say that there are some benchmark about the degrees of digitalization in various ASEAN states, and every member state should actually use that particular benchmark. But I don't think that ASEAN is being able to come up with some sort of institutional mandate. For example, to Singapore to give some portions of its technological advantage and export that to Laos. I don't think that ASEAN is able to do that since we don't actually change the nature, the natural cooperation for ASEANs. In that situation, this is actually the condition where ASEAN needs support from dialogue partners, because we cannot expect any pool of resources from within. We can only expect that there would be CASI, for example, from Korea to hand over some technology, connectivity projects, and so on and so forth, and any supports by the dialogue partners. And then with this logic, I think for ASEAN, it is better to have more. So the more, the merrier. And the worst situation for ASEAN to pursue any kind of economic ambition is to have a region that is inherently conflicting. To have a region that is inherently conflicting, it means that there would be some clashes from projects as offered by different dialogue partners. And ASEAN, I believe that ASEAN does not want that. And this is where actually your reference to dynamic equilibrium is important. At the end of the day, with this particular agenda from ASEAN, can we maintain the region to become more open and inclusive? Can we make sure that the best situation that we can get, the worst situation that we can get from US-China is not conflict but only competition? Best if we can expect them to cooperate, but playing dynamic equilibrium in ASEAN, it means that we can compete with China on certain issues, but we should cooperate on China on the other issues. China and US can compete on certain issues, but they should collaborate on another issues. That probably would mean translation on dynamic equilibrium to actual ASEAN sort of ideas and institutional building. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, we are almost at the end of this discussion.
For Laos to lead is a rotation. It's a long and winding road. Success will not happen overnight, but it will happen. So, learning from the Lao culture, education is very important. When it comes to education, Lao need to better interact, better learn, because we cannot fight against the time. Laos needs to make quick decisions, good decisions. So ASEAN is the house, ASEAN is the family of Laos. I think all ASEAN countries will be happy to see Laos becoming the chair of the year, but ASEAN will give their best practices for Laos, because Laos doesn't only represent less than 10 million people, but we are there. Now it's time for Laos to convince ASEAN that Laos is a credible member, a credible chair, and Laos would be happy to bring ASEAN to a higher level, to a more well-respected regional organization.
Thank you so much. And now, Andrew, 2 minutes wrap up.
I don't think I have to wrap up. We should be, you know, speaking as an analyst, we should be well-tempered in expecting what can Laos do as an ASEAN chair, and there are some reason to expect them to be successful in pursuing their agenda. I think all the theme enhancing connectivity and enhancing resilience has been well crafted by Laos, and I think it is also within their calculation that there are some deliverables that could be pursued. But also, if the challenges is big, like dealing with geopolitical challenges, and this is actually where I have to remind myself and my colleagues as an experts to be realistic at what ASEAN can do and what Laos can do. And given the legacies that Indonesia leave as an ASEAN chair last year, I think there have been some limitation, and we really have to be honest about what ASEAN can do and cannot do. And that is also, as an Indonesian, we have to tell this to the government, the new government, that in terms of thinking about ASEAN, we really have to see that ASEAN is now is a very bureaucratized association. There have been some jurisprudence, there have been some institutional habits that can be pursued by ASEAN, and this is actually the time when we should be really rational about what ASEAN can do and what ASEAN cannot do. All the things that we can put for ASEAN on digital economic framework and so on and so forth, we should really rely on ASEAN potentials, but there are certain things that we cannot do with ASEAN, and let's become more diligent in finding opportunities and challenges in the region. Thank you.
And that concludes our Talking ASEAN Laos ASEAN Chairmanship, Priorities and Concern. I would like to thank our speakers, Pariza and Andrew, for your explanation, for your remarks and insights. Really, really grateful to have them. And I would like to also thank our participants, whether here at the venue or through YouTube. Thank you so much for your participation. And do not forget to subscribe and follow our social media, the Habib Center. And you can tune in for the next events that the Habib Center will have from our social media. So again, thank you so much, and have a nice long weekend. Probably we'll have one. And see you again on the next the Habib Center event. Thank you so much. See ya. I would like to invite